Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to dehydrate chicken and then I'm going to use the dehydrated chicken along with some other dehydrated ingredients to make chicken soup. I'm Rebecca from StockingMyPantry.com. Now this is my first time dehydrating chicken, so I'm going to do just a small amount of it to test it out. And I personally recommend that anytime you try something new, whether it be a canning recipe or dehydrating, or even growing a certain type of sprout or microgreen, that you start with a small amount to test it out, and then if you like it, doing it on a larger scale in the future. So this is no exception. Now, before I show you the process of dehydrating the chicken, I want to address a couple of issues with it. First off, from what I've been able to find, there aren't any approved methods or information on dehydrating chicken or other meats other than making jerky and storing it for a short period of time. So you need to do your own research on this and determine whether or not it's right for you. Now, in addition to that, after dehydrating, you may want to store the dehydrated chicken in the freezer. Now, that may seem to defeat the purpose of dehydrating, but there are a couple of reasons I feel it's worthwhile. The first reason is that dehydrated food takes up less space than food that isn't dehydrated. So you can fit more meat or whatever it is you're dehydrating in the freezer if you dehydrate it. Second, if there ever is a power outage, you really don't have to worry about any of the dehydrated meat, eggs, and so on that you've stored in your freezer. Now, you'll be in big trouble with meat that you've frozen when there's a power outage, because obviously, we've all heard the horror stories about the power going out or someone unplugging a freezer, and then you end up with just tons of meat that you have to throw out, and that's horrible. But the good thing is, if anything like that happened and you had dehydrated meat in your freezer, it's certainly not going to hurt any of it if you have stored it in the freezer, because technically it can be stored at room temperature and be just fine. The storing it in the freezer is just kind of a safeguard, all right? But it's not a big deal if there's a period of time where the freezer is not working. Also, it can be handy to have dehydrated meat on hand for taking on camping or backpacking trips, or if you want to bring along some of your own food when you're traveling. And in that case, it certainly wouldn't hurt to not have it in a freezer or in a refrigerator. You could just have it in your backpack or suitcase or wherever, and it'd be fine to use it while you're out and about. Now, since this is my first time dehydrating chicken, I can't say how it will turn out, but from everything that I've learned from watching other YouTube videos and reading up on this topic, dehydrated chicken doesn't rehydrate well unless it's been canned or pressure cooked before dehydrating. So in other words, while you definitely need to start off with cooked chicken, you don't want to first saute or boil the chicken before dehydrating it. You can either buy canned chicken from the grocery store or take some of your home canned chicken, or you can pressure cook chicken in your Instant Pot or whatever type of pressure cooker that you have. So when you cook the chicken or purchase the chicken, whatever it is, make sure that it's been pressure cooked. And thankfully, canned chicken has been pressure cooked. When you can your chicken in a pressure canner, it has been pressure cooked. Or when you buy canned chicken from the grocery store, it has also been pressure cooked. So that's a great way to have pressure cooked chicken. Is you can either do it in a pressure cooker, or you can also pull a can of chicken off the shelf, either your home canned chicken or canned chicken from the grocery store. Either of those will work fine. So in my case, I'm starting with this pint of chicken that I canned. Now, I recently canned this chicken and I was a little bit short on this pint. You can see how it doesn't go all the way up to the top. There's a little bit of the chicken sticking up above the liquid that's in the can, and that won't hurt anything, but it might kind of discolor or whatever. So I thought, well, this is a great can of chicken for me to start with dehydrating, because I kind of prefer to use it sooner rather than later anyway. So I opened the chicken, and after I opened it, I drained it and I ran hot water over it. Now, prior to canning it, I trimmed most of the fat off of it, but there's likely still just a little bit of fat in it, and I want to get rid of that before dehydrating it. So one of the issues with dehydrating meat is that there can be fat which can go rancid, and so it's best if you start off with meat that has as little fat as possible. So I put the chicken into a colander and I broke it up a bit before thoroughly rinsing it with water. And by broke it up, I mean it was all kind of lumped together in a big, kind of a big blob because of being canned, and I just kind of separated it out and then ran a lot of hot water over it. So I then took it and I broke it up into very small pieces, and I spread them over the dehydrator trays without any overlap, or very little overlap, if any. So I just spread them out. I ended up needing to use 3 dehydrator trays for this one scant pint of chicken. Now, in order to make sure that it dehydrates well, you don't want any big chunks. So take your time breaking it into small pieces. I already did that, but as you're putting it onto the tray, if you notice that you have some kind of big pieces, go ahead and just break them up a little bit more. And since the pieces are so small, you'll either want to use a mesh dehydrator sheet or a fruit leather tray so that the small pieces of chicken don't fall through when you're dehydrating them. Also, when you dehydrate any type of meat, you want to set it at the highest possible temperature on your dehydrator. Now, when using my dehydrator to dehydrate fruit or vegetables, I often use a quite low temperature. So for example, I might use only 115. And I do that because I want to retain as much of the nutrients as possible. But since meat is already cooked, and it may even be cooked again when you use it, you're not going to lose any additional nutrients by dehydrating at a higher temperature. Also, the chicken will dehydrate much faster at a high temperature, and also with it being meat, you want to dehydrate it fast and at a high enough temperature that you don't have to worry about it going bad during the dehydrating process. So that's another reason I wouldn't set it at a low temperature like 110 degrees. That's just like a hot day, and putting out chicken to sit for hours, that just is not a good idea. So at 160 degrees or 165, whatever is the highest temperature your dehydrator goes to, that's what you'll want to use. It'll dehydrate fast, and also it will not have a chance to go bad during the dehydrating process. So I'm setting the dehydrator at 160 degrees Fahrenheit, and I expect that it will take between 4 and 6 hours to dehydrate completely. So I'm going to bring you back and show you what it looks like at that point, and then I'll also use it to make a small amount of chicken soup because I want to see how it rehydrates. I have heard people say that it just doesn't rehydrate well, and so this is the best way to find out, is to just try it, and I'll be sure and give you an honest review on what I think about the texture and all of that after I try it out in the soup. So this is how it looks after just 2 hours of dehydrating. And to my surprise, it is dry as a bone. It is completely dehydrated. So I'm going to let the chicken cool down to room temperature and put it into a mason jar. And since I'm going to store it in the freezer, I'm just putting a plastic lid on the jar instead of vacuum sealing it. Okay, now let's test out using this chicken in some chicken soup. So I've put 3 cups of water and 3 teaspoons of chicken bouillon in a pot, and I've brought it to a boil. I am adding in a half a cup of dehydrated chicken, a quarter of a cup of dehydrated celery, a quarter of a cup of dehydrated onion, and a quarter of a cup of dehydrated carrots. Now after adding the vegetables, I put a lid on and I let the ingredients sit in the hot water for 30 minutes. After letting it sit for 30 minutes, I brought the soup to a boil, and then I reduced the heat to a simmer, and I let it simmer for 10 minutes before tasting it. So thankfully, the chicken rehydrated great. I really couldn't tell any big difference between it and fresh or canned chicken that I put into soup if I was making soup normally without dehydrated chicken. So I definitely recommend adding dehydrated chicken to your prepper pantry, especially if you don't have a freeze dryer but want to have meat in your pantry. You, of course, can also use store-bought canned chicken or canned chicken yourself and have it in your pantry that way. But if you want just another option and you don't have a freeze dryer, then I think I would recommend dehydrating chicken just as another way to add some chicken to your prepper pantry. Now, it's probably okay to vacuum seal the dehydrated chicken and store it at room temperature, but if you have the room for it in your freezer, I recommend storing this in your freezer. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you'd like the video, and if you haven't already done so, if you'd subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.